In the not-too-distant future, strange creatures suddenly emerge and begin to exterminate humanity, leading to an apocalyptic event with few survivors. Various speculations have arose regarding the cause, such as a contagious bug, a mysterious purple haze, or a divine retribution, but none have been confirmed. In the city, Paul searches for provisions amidst the chaos, only to be interrupted by blaring sirens. He navigates the streets cautiously, avoiding danger and seeking shelter as the city is engulfed in smoke. Finding refuge in an abandoned house on the outskirts, Paul is reunited with his children, whom he now cares for alone. Fast forward 15 years, Paul's sons have matured into robust teenagers living in the same house. They venture out during the day for supplies, but remain hidden at night. As dusk approaches, Joseph secures the windows and calls their dog Rocco inside, while Paul waits for Thomas to return. Upon Thomas's delayed arrival, tensions rise as he explains helping the neighboring Rose family with their farm. After locking up the house, they sit down for dinner, with Paul reprimanding Thomas for his tardiness and setting boundaries. Joseph mocks his brother for it and an argument soon escalates into a physical fight, but Paul quickly stops them and reminds them that they're men, not animals. Following dinner, Paul observes his sons engaging in a game of chess, but his attention is diverted when Rocco starts scratching and growling at the floor. Interpreting this as a sign, Paul and Thomas head downstairs and are alarmed by the sudden banging on the door, indicating that creatures are attempting to enter. They immediately brace the door to prevent it from being forced open, enduring vigorous shaking and pounding for a short period until the creatures retreat. Thomas confronts Joseph for not assisting, only for Joseph to explain that he was listening to gather more information. Joseph deduces that the creatures made 3 attempts, the first lasting 10 seconds, the second lasting 20 seconds, and the last attempt being a brief one. Joseph theorized that the first attempt was a trial, the second was the actual effort to breach the door, and the third was an expression of frustration. The next day, upon inspecting the door, they discover numerous claw marks on the wood, indicating that it has weakened. To reinforce it, Paul and his sons venture out to find wood, returning with their discoveries. While Thomas cuts the wood, Paul checks on Joseph, who is constructing something in the barn. After some encouragement from Paul, Joseph admits he has been trying to build a vehicle due to feeling confined and scared. Despite struggling to make it operational, Paul makes a few adjustments that enable the vehicle to function. Excited by the success, Paul takes the teenagers for a ride to teach them how to drive. They go home after an hour of wandering and Paul mentions that the windows still require reinforcement. He instructs the boys to head to the river to salvage materials for this task. Thomas becomes upset as he was promised a visit to the farm that day, but Paul insists that the window reinforcement is a priority. As they drive off, Thomas accuses Joseph of being favored by Paul and sent along for protection. Joseph dismisses the idea of needing protection, which leads Thomas to exit the car near the farm and ask to be picked up later. Back at the house, Paul finishes securing the door and takes a solitary break by the waterfall to smoke. While observing his surroundings, he notices a dark hole among the rocks. Meanwhile, Joseph secures himself to the car before exploring an old abandoned ship at the river in search of supplies. Inside a locker, he comes across a provocative image from a magazine, momentarily leaving him speechless. As he investigates further, he is startled by a swarm of bugs emerging from a pile of trash, prompting him to hastily leave the area. At the farm, Thomas assists the family with chores, but it becomes apparent that his primary motivation for being there is to spend time with the owner's daughter, Charlotte. The mutual attraction between Thomas and Charlotte is evident as they take a stroll together through the field. Charlotte shows Thomas a rope tied to a tree, explaining that when she was younger, she would tie herself to the tree to have more freedom to play while still technically being attached to it. They also play a game where they come up with wild theories about what caused the apocalypse. When it's time for Thomas to leave, Charlotte gives him a tight hug. The sun is setting, so both boys need to hurry home. Paul returns home and becomes worried when he finds Rocco but not his sons. Joseph manages to start the car after a few tries and drives home. Thomas is running as fast as he can, but he slips and falls into a crevice in the ground. When Joseph comes by to pick up his brother, he doesn't see him around and just keeps going. Once he makes it home and tells his dad what happened, Paul tells him to get inside and lock everything up while he and Rocco look for Thomas. In the crevice, Thomas wakes up with a sore body and uses a lighter to see around. He's shocked to find a creature reaching through a hole in the wall. It screeches, which alerts Paul and Rocco to its presence. Thomas carefully takes out a knife and stabs the monster's hand, causing it to retreat. However, a second creature appears above him and grabs his face. Thomas struggles to breathe, but before he can pass out, Paul arrives and pulls the monster back, killing it quickly. Paul and Rocco take refuge in a crevice after ensuring Thomas' safety, hoping to avoid danger by staying put until sunrise. However, their plan is foiled when the ground starts shaking and they realize that the creatures are now burrowing underground, blocking their exit by filling the crevice with dirt. As Rocco continues to bark frantically and the crevice rumbles, Paul instructs his son and the dog to move back while he prepares a flare to defend themselves. When the creatures try to reach them through the opening in the ground, Paul creates a small explosion that unfortunately affects him as well. Meanwhile, Joseph hears strange noises in the house and prepares for the worst by tying a rope to his chair and positioning himself in front of the main door. He then pretends to be asleep, waiting for the creature to fall into his trap. Sure enough, the creature tests Joseph's authenticity by growing its nail and poking him, but the boy remains still. Satisfied that Joseph is truly asleep, the creature enters the house, only to be caught in a cage that falls from the ceiling when Joseph pulls the rope. Feeling proud of his successful plan, Joseph covers the cage with a blanket and drifts off to sleep. The following morning, Joseph is concerned because the others haven't returned yet, so he sets out in the car to search for them. Meanwhile, Thomas has cleared the dirt from the entrance and is pulling his wounded father out. Rocco emerges and follows the sound of the car to locate Joseph and guide him back to his family. The brothers quickly work together to carry Paul to the car and then to his bed at home. As they discuss their next steps, Thomas notices the cage and lifts the blanket, causing the creature inside to become agitated. Joseph quickly replaces the blanket, explaining that light hurts the creatures. They then bandage Paul's wounds, while Joseph mentions that the creature took only 8 seconds to enter the home last night, the shortest time yet. He believes there may have been a second creature that left, and their behavior is changing too rapidly, suggesting something is off. Thomas points out that the creatures are intelligent, possibly seeking revenge for the ones killed in the cave. However, Joseph thinks only Paul was responsible for the killings. To prove his point, Thomas tries to kill the creature in the cage, but Joseph intervenes, wanting to study it instead. In the ensuing struggle, the creature escapes and hides under the bed. When it finally emerges, Rocco starts barking at it, causing the creature to transform and prepare to attack. Joseph quickly secures the creature while Thomas uses an axe to remove its head. Eager to gain more knowledge, Joseph brings the body to the barn and begins dissecting it in the presence of Rocco and several insects. Despite his efforts, he struggles to understand the creature's nature. Thomas suggests taking Paul to Charlotte's farm for better care and resources. Although Joseph doubts the Rose's willingness to help, Thomas insists on accompanying him. The brothers put Paul back in the car and drive to the farm, where Charlotte's parents prove Joseph right. They don't have enough medicine to spare, so they refuse to take in someone hurt so badly. Charlotte protests, but she's ignored. However, her parents do agree to let Thomas stay, which would leave Paul and Joseph with more resources at their house. Joseph hastily departs, and Thomas pursues him, leading to a heated altercation in which Joseph attributes their father's impending demise to Thomas's actions. Enraged, Thomas shoves his brother to the ground and begins to strangle him, but promptly regains his composure and halts his aggression. Joseph drives away with his father, leaving Thomas to stay with the family at the farm. Later, Charlotte treats Thomas to a delicious meal and gives him a tour of her possessions, which he hasn't had the chance to see before. During a tender moment, the teenagers share a kiss, but their intimacy is abruptly halted by Charlotte's father, who instructs his daughter to leave the room. On his way back, Joseph notices the sheep in a state of panic and widespread dirt, indicating that the creatures are moving beneath the ground. Upon returning home, Joseph sees a trail of dirt near the wall, leading him to fear that the monsters may be lurking beneath the house. After attending to his father, Joseph heads to the barn to devise a new plan, securing the windows and exploring the house. However, he accidentally falls through a carpet, revealing a hole underneath, signaling that the monsters have infiltrated the building. Meanwhile, at the farm, Charlotte discovers Thomas snooping in the kitchen. Concerned for his father, Thomas seeks medicine to depart quickly. Charlotte provides him with the medication, and he expresses gratitude with a hug, promising to return, oblivious to potential eavesdroppers. As Thomas rushes towards the gate, a farm worker confronts him with a gun, accusing him of theft. Despite Thomas's attempts to explain that Charlotte gave him the medicine, the man remains unconvinced. The employees band together, apprehending Thomas and leading him to the barn, where they prepare to harm him. As one man aims to shoot, a sudden hole appears under him, causing him to miss his target. Chaos ensues as a creature emerges from the hole, alarming everyone. In the main house, Charlotte's parents are awakened by a noise and the father lights a candle to investigate. A creature enters the room, attacking them and causing the candle to start a fire. The monster moves between the father and the mother, attempting to harm them. The father manages to fend it off, allowing the mother to escape in search of her daughter. However, the creature intercepts her before she can go far. It undergoes a transformation and then proceeds to attack the mother. Charlotte, in her bedroom, listens in horror as her parents are killed. When the noises, she emerges and follows a trail of blood, leading her to find the creature in the bathroom with her mother's body. Meanwhile, at the barn, the men struggle to fend off more creatures, with some falling victim to the attacks. The barn erupts in flames, and Thomas breaks free from restraints just as a creature approaches him, only to be shot down by Charlotte. Afterward, the teens run out and Thomas sees the house on fire. Charlotte explains her parents are gone, so they agree to go to Thomas' place. Joseph, on the other hand, tosses furniture into a hole to delay the creatures, checks on his unconscious father, gives him a kiss on the forehead, and prepares for a confrontation. The door's opening reveals Thomas and Charlotte, much to Joseph's relief. However, their conversation is cut short by Paul's awakening. He quickly takes his medicine and urges his sons to continue fighting. Joseph shares his plan with the group, and they gather gas cans from the barn while Rocco alerts them to any incoming danger. They also move an old freezer into the house. Thomas and Charlotte reinforce the remaining windows, while Joseph creates a makeshift barrier using furniture and pours gasoline on it. He adds explosive objects and a burning cigarette to the pile, just as a creature emerges from the chimney in the room with Paul. As another beast emerges from the opening, Thomas lunges from behind and plunges his knife into its back. The creature retaliates, but Thomas retrieves his blade and strikes it a fatal blow to the skull. Meanwhile, a third monster targets Charlotte, but she swiftly takes it down with a well-placed shot. As they rejoin Joseph, the pair quickly resumes their efforts to move the freezer. But just as they gain momentum, the door behind them bursts open, revealing a blood-covered Paul, who has just defeated the chimney monster. Equipped with Charlotte's gun, Paul begins firing at the creatures below, but the sheer number of them becomes apparent as they pour into the corridor, closing in on him. Paul initiates the first move by kicking something, causing a disturbance that leads most creatures to fall through the floor due to the weight of the object. Despite a few monsters managing to remain, the teenagers swiftly take action to eliminate them before they can harm Paul, who is impressed by their collaborative effort. Subsequently, the trio of teens and Rocco head towards the freezer for safety. Instead of following them, Paul opts to stay behind and close the door to provide them with more time. As the group seeks refuge inside the freezer, Paul reminisces about a moment from the past when he comforted his children, assuring them that everything would be all right. A fresh wave of creatures enters the scene, and Paul distracts them until a stack of furniture collapses, causing the entire house to crumble and catch fire. The freezer begins to move and continues for several minutes until it finally halts. Upon emerging from the freezer, the teens frantically search through the debris for Paul, only to be startled when a creature suddenly appears. They quickly rush to the car and speed away as the fiery monster pursues them. Despite Charlotte's bullets being ineffective, she manages to incapacitate the monster by striking it with her gun when it gets close enough. A short distance later, the group stops the car and gazes at the stars, a sight they had never before seen due to always being indoors at night. The following morning, they return to the ruins of the house and decide against rebuilding in the same location. Following a search for any available resources, they bury their deceased loved ones and bid a final farewell. Subsequently, the three teens and Rocco depart in the car, aiming to find a new residence in the farms located down the valley. Please like and subscribe for more video like this. Thanks for watching.